All right, well, welcome to another episode of Coffee with Bruce.
Great to see you, Bruce.
Yes, and so today I'm here with Tim Batten, and uh, Tim is somebody who I've known for a very long time. In fact, we went to university together way back in the last millennium, and I guess Tim and I have followed slightly different career paths, but Tim has been a CIO for a number of large Australian companies, some of the big banks, worked in some of the big retail companies. So it has an actually really interesting breadth of experience around the business side of technology. And recently, Tim and I were having a conversation over lunch about APIs, as you do, and Tim kind of made the point that even at the business level in his company, there was some level of interest in APIs, but that perhaps it was getting a bit challenging to get business leaders to care about APIs. And he suggested perhaps I could dig into this. And so that actually led to me doing a blog post, and we'll give you a link to that later on. And today we're going to talk about APIs. So, Tim, thanks very much for joining.
Thanks very much for having me, Bruce.
So, funnily enough, not too long after you and I had that lunch, and I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll go, research APIs and think about what I can have to say about them. There was this fairly substantial funding round for a company called Rapid API, and so I kind of read about that, and my co-author Larry said, we should do a blog post on APIs. And so I was actually beginning to feel like there's something in the water that I've got all these people from different angles telling me I need to go and focus about APIs. And that was what kind of led to that blog post. And before I just sort of ask you a few more questions, I'll just sort of mention for the people who maybe don't know much about what an API is, kind of what I learned over the process of trying to write that blog post, which was, of course, APIs are an old technology. We've been using them for about as long as we've been using computers, but they've become a very important technology in recent years. And one reason for that is that we're seeing this kind of increased modularization of software. So whereas once upon a time, big pieces of software got written by a single company, these days you can just get a component from a company that just builds that component, and the way you access that component is through an API. And Martin Casado makes this nice analogy to the automotive industry where, that kind of modularization happened as we went from very, very vertically integrated companies that took iron ore and coal and turned them into steel, and eventually out the other end came a car, to now, there are all these little companies that build suspension and floor mats and all the various components. And then somebody like a Ford or a General Motors kind of puts together the components. And software has kind of gone the same way, that now, you want payments, you go to Stripe or somebody like that. You want messaging, you go to Twilio. There's like all these little companies, or actually quite big companies now, billion-dollar companies that will just solve one part of your problem. And so APIs are the way you access that. And so they've become an important technology from a business perspective, just because of it giving you more options for how you can put together a piece of software. I think a famous example would have been the Google Maps API, which has been around for a long time. And all of a sudden, people could build mapping into other applications, and a whole lot of innovation got done, because now, once you had mapping, lots of things that had never been thought of became possible. I mean, I guess a good example would be ride sharing. Kind of was built on the back of the fact that you could have a map, to show where the customer was, to help the driver find a good route to the destination. And that was a really important piece of technology that it enabled other kinds of innovation. So that's a kind of quick intro to APIs and kind of why they matter, but they are effectively an interface for accessing a piece of software. Now, Tim, now that I've talked to you for 3 or 4 minutes, what was it that made you think that I should be looking at APIs? What was going on in your business life that made you think there was an issue here that needed to be addressed?
So I think everything you described there, Bruce, was really insightful when I read it, and I thought it was a really interesting perspective. I came at it almost from the business aggregation and disaggregation point of view. So I think, as the world becomes more digital, traditional value chains that companies are in charge of are breaking up and reconfiguring in new and interesting ways. New businesses are emerging in parts of those value chains, And it's sort of an extension of what you're talking about from a software point of view. So now I think it's really important that companies think about their business in terms of the different components of it. Sometimes it's called business capabilities, or a composition of business capabilities. And each of those capabilities may actually be their future, or a key part of their future, or the other way around. That capability may be something that they're doing at the moment that they won't want to do going forward. So thinking of your business in terms of an aggregated set of business capabilities that can be composed into your current business or decomposed, and then how do I give myself maximum strategic flexibility in terms of where I invest, where I disinvest, where I partner. I think it's just absolutely critical for businesses. And this is where ecosystems, of course, come in as well. Increasingly, businesses operate as part of real-time ecosystems. The way I communicate with other members of the ecosystem is with APIs. The way I can make myself composable and decomposable is by thinking of those different business capabilities as being separated by APIs.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I can't help thinking of the Amazon example, the sort of fairly famous memo from Jeff Bezos, which I think was very early on, right? It was like 2002 or something,
Yes.
That said, thou shalt use APIs to expose your product or your service to the rest of Amazon, and there's no going through back doors. Everything has to be done through an API. And so effectively, like, he made a what looks on the surface to be a very technical mandate, but it actually had a huge impact on the way the business operated, because it forced these kind of modular boundaries to be done in a way that the company could grow around that kind of disaggregation.
Exactly, and build different parts of the company in interesting new ways that he probably hadn't thought of at the time. I think it's really interesting. You've got a CEO there who's caring enough about APIs. I must say, in my experience, I still sometimes see business people glaze over at the term API. Isn't that just a kind of technical thing? I don't really care. That's despite there being quite a lot of literature for quite a while about needing to product manage your APIs. So that's actually why I thought someone like you, a great communicator, might be able to put something together that bridged the gap between that technology and a real business perspective on APIs.
And can you think of some examples where this is working well? Like, what have you seen in the industry where people are doing a good job of putting some part of their business inside an API and then exposing that either within the business or to other businesses?
So I've got a financial services and a retailing background, as you say. So one example is the travel insurance business. So I think I've seen figures that now 70 or 80% of travel insurance is sold through APIs, because the people distributing the travel insurance, the airlines or the travel agents, aren't the carriers of that insurance. There's companies behind them who are actually the carriers. And so making that relationship work sweetly is it's dependent on APIs. That's just one example.
Yeah,
but,
and I mean, and
so
another one
many.
that we talked about previously was about DBS. Is a bank that's quite well known for their level of innovation and investment in technology, and they've had done a big splash with how much they're using APIs and effectively exposing everything that the bank does through a set of APIs. And I think that they would also stand as an example of someone doing that very well.
There's a story of their CEO up on a whiteboard describing what APIs are to his leadership team. And I think that's quite telling. But yes, they're a great leader in that way.
And what about where it goes wrong? I mean, I feel like, when you look at big companies, particularly, I think big financials, there's maybe this tendency to say, well, we'll slap an API on something and that'll make it a success. Like, do you see a kind of API washing go wrong?
I guess probably more I've seen is failing to exploit APIs fully. So perhaps the open banking initiative is an example of this. Most of the banks are having now to expose a certain amount of customer data due to consumer data rights through open APIs. Very few of them are actually thinking about consuming those APIs themselves. So the startups, the sort of the new economy is taking advantage of that, the accounting packages and so forth. But I think there's the opportunity for banks to actually consume each other's APIs and give you a holistic view of your finances, even if it's spread across multiple financial institutions, for example. And that holistic view is integral to then being able to go up the value chain and offer you advice, for example. So I think it's that just as you say, throwing up APIs because I have to, and not really thinking about, well, what am I going to do in this new environment in terms of not just setting them up, but consuming them from some of my competitors is, I think at the moment it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can clearly see how it's a real change in thinking from, effectively you're changing your model for like we're vertically integrated and we take care of everything to we're a supplier of some components, we're an integrator of other people's components, and we innovate by putting together all the best things we can find, which may not all be done in-house. That's quite a shift in thinking that needs to come, and there's obviously more to that than just we use APIs.
Absolutely.
Well, look, Tim, I think this is a good introduction for people, and we'll give some pointers for where they can read more. Anything you want to say to sort of wrap it up here?
So just for the business people out there, APIs are really worthwhile looking into. They're important from a business strategic point of view. And I'd recommend reading Bruce's blog post for an initial introduction in there to really get your head around what they mean and why they're strategically important for your business.
Yeah, thanks. And I mean, I also learned a lot by looking at what's going on in the startup world. And, in particular, I found Andreessen Horowitz, who've got a lot of different startups that they're in their portfolio who have something to do with APIs. They've done a lot to sort of help people understand why they're viewing that as an important area for investment. So we'll provide a few links for people to go chase those things down. And Tim, I'll say thanks very much. This has been a great discussion. Thanks for sending me off down this particular rabbit hole.
Great talking with you, Bruce.
Thanks, Tim. Perfect.